I don't know if this happens to you, but I always get bored of my manager careers in FIFA after a while, because of many reasons. I don't like seeing the teams wearing the same shirts after 4 or 5 years. I don't like seeing some teams making some really random transfers that make no sense, a lot of random players I don't even recognize and stuff. So I always lose interest after a while. So a few days ago I was thinking about how when I was a kid I really liked to play FIFA 07 on my PS2, and a few years later my parents got me FIFA 10, and I loved starting a career mode on FIFA 07 because then I would jump to FIFA 10 when I got to the 2009-10 season. Because that way you could actually see the players developing somewhat realistically, instead of seeing players that were only good in FIFA and not in real life getting to 94 ratings after a few seasons, when in reality they didn't even play for the teams. Also, the teams would actually have their updated squads and their newest kits for that season. So I was thinking, why has no one ever done this? I mean, I really like watching, like people's careers on YouTube because it's fun, But I think this could actually be even more interesting. So I thought, well, why shouldn't I do it? If no one's doing it, why shouldn't I? So I managed to get some of the older games to start a series and do the same thing, starting in FIFA 07 all the way to the newest games. And I'm planning to get FIFA 22 when it comes out, depending of course on whether EA actually decides to deal with some of the criticism that FIFA 21 got, of course. But anyway, how would this work? As I was saying, I would start a manager career in FIFA 07, which means the 2006-2007 season. I would play the first 3 seasons there, and when I reached the 2009-10 season, I would jump to FIFA 10, and so on, until I reached the newest games. This way we could keep some of the realism with the updated squads, the new players, the new kits, and seeing other players that were already in the games developing realistically. I'm also a big fan of making graphs and charts and all that stuff. I'm a big fan of statistics, so I thought it would be quite nice to, to keep track of how many wins we have, how many times we lose games, all the finals that we play, our achievements or trophies, stuff like that. So I would be happy to actually put some effort and focus on that sort of stuff. We could keep track of our signings and how much money have we spent. Now, how would I choose which teams to manage and which players to sign and all that? So, first of all, I really like to have, the audience getting involved in the decision making and all that, but I know this is my first video and I honestly don't expect to have thousands of views so fast. So at first I would choose the team and signings and all that, but if this blows up, then it would be really fun to have you guys, giving me suggestions and opinions and, telling me what to do next. So my personal preference right now is to start in England with either a championship team or a team from the lower half of the Premier League. I don't know, probably a team like Sunderland or Hull City or Manchester City, or I don't know. Remember, the year is 2006, so back then Manchester City were not rich, Tottenham wouldn't be regulars in European competitions, and Bolton were still in the Premier League. So if things go right after a few years, maybe I jump to a mid-table team like Everton, for example, and then to one of the big teams like Manchester United or Chelsea or Liverpool or whatever. Maybe I'd even go abroad and sign for a team in the Spanish league or the Italian league or whatever. Which brings me to my next point, realism. I want to keep this as realistic as possible. When we start this, we already have a big advantage over the game, which is that we already know what's gonna happen with certain players and certain teams. We already know that Manchester City will have a lot of money in the future. We already know that some players like Lewandowski or Neymar or Harry Kane will be some of the biggest stars in the planet in the future. So, I wouldn't like to be the manager of, I don't know, Southampton in the League One and having a team filled with players like Neymar and Griezmann and Virgil van Dijk in every position, you know what I mean? I mean, we could sign one of them, but maybe 2, but then again, I want to keep this as realistic as possible. This also affects the way we would spend our money. It doesn't matter if the game already gives us a lot of money to spend. If I was managing, for example, Newcastle or Arsenal. We all know in real life their owners are not precisely that really into spending money on their teams. So I wouldn't be able to sign the best and most expensive players in the world. I would have to stay inside the lines of the, let's call it, historical context. Also, whenever it was time for me to move to another team, I like to consider how it would be in real life. For example, there would be no way I would be able to sign for Manchester United before Alex Ferguson retired. You know what I mean? There's no way Chelsea or Real Madrid would pick me as their new manager if my only achievement is to avoid relegation with Wigan. You know? So, just because the game gives us the opportunity to play with a bigger team doesn't necessarily mean that would happen in real life. So, without further ado, let's begin the process to choose our team and to begin our story as a manager. Now, I've narrowed down the list of potential teams to start to these 6. Manchester City, Aston Villa, Sunderland, Hull City, QPR, and Aberdeen. Now, I know what you're thinking, I said England, I didn't mention Scotland, but anyway. We're gonna talk about the 2005-06 season, which is the one immediately before the one we're gonna start in. As you can see, Manchester City and Aston Villa both had very poor seasons in real life. They finished just above the relegation zone. On the other hand, Sunderland actually got relegated. They had a terrible season, managing to get only 3 wins. Then Hull City and QPR both had their close calls, but in the Championship, while Aberdeen had a very, very underwhelming season in Scotland, finishing only 6th in the Scottish Premier League. So I think all of these teams would potentially sack their managers this year. Some of them, like Aston Villa, actually did. They sacked David O'Leary and replaced him with Martin O'Neill. Sunderland, on the other hand, also sacked Mick McCarthy at the beginning of March. So yeah, it would make sense if they hired a new manager for the next season. Then, as you can see, there is a massive difference in the budgets of all of these teams. Manchester City with a pretty healthy 25 million budget. Aston Villa and Sunderland with pretty acceptable budgets as well. Meanwhile, on the other hand, Hull City, QPR and Aberdeen, they had very small budgets, so it would be quite a challenge to start with them. Then we can see the overall squad rating. So as you can see, Manchester City and Aston Villa have the more talented players, while Hull and QPR, it would be, you know, pretty difficult to play good football with them. And finally, the main objective. This is an objective that we would put for ourselves. Regardless of whatever the game tells us to do, you know, like having a cup run or whatever. This is a goal that we would have to actually do to continue in the team for the next season or to sign for a new team. So as you can see, I've given different objectives to each team. Manchester City and Aston Villa would be to improve their performance and finish in the top half of the Premier League. Sunderland would be to actually get promoted immediately. And Hull City and QPR to finish in the top half of the Championship, while Aberdeen, they would have to finish in the top 3, just behind Rangers and Celtic in the Scottish Premier League. Now, I know it is quite unusual to see teams from the top divisions like Aston Villa and Manchester City signing just some random guy that popped up in the training ground saying he wanted to be a manager. So we're gonna pretend that we are, I don't know, like a former player or part of the coaching staff or something. But anyway, from these 6 clubs, I think the best one to start would be Aston Villa. Because, first of all, I think they're a good team. I mean, they have good players, they have a pretty okay budget. They're not the highest budget of this list. They're not the worst either. Also, Aston Villa have a nice history. They've won several trophies over the years. They've actually won a Champions League or European Cup back then, so they have a nice history. So I think it would be a genuine challenge. They're already in the Premier League, so I think that for my very first career here on YouTube, it would be nice if it was in the Premier League already. Maybe in the future we could go to Scotland or lower divisions, but for now let's stay in the Premier League. So yeah, we are now the managers of Aston Villa in the 2006-2007 season. This is the very first episode of this series. Tell me, what do you guys think? Leave your comments and suggestions. I'm gonna be waiting for a few days to see how many people actually watch this, and then I will upload the next episode in which we actually get to see, the start of our career, name our manager, and all that stuff, So stay in tune. Thank you so much for watching this video. Please subscribe and leave a like if you want, and see you next time for the best manager career mode of all time.